will not let this time go by without noting his accomplishments. He'll address us shortly, but we did wish to honor him. And now, after we've embarrassed you, Elder Echohawk, could you join us up here? Governor?
Let me just add my comment with what Lieutenant Governor Mellis said. All of us look to somebody as a role model. And sometimes in our youth, we look at probably people not to be our role model. And sometimes we get off the straight and narrow path. For all of us, Native American or otherwise, Larry Echohawk is a great role model for us all, of somebody who's taking his God-given talents and magnifying those opportunities in our community by giving back and giving service, by being a good example, a man of high integrity, of capability, that he's using his talents to, in fact, improve the communities that he finds himself associated with. So for all of us here today, this is not just Larry Echohawk, the Native American. This is Larry Echohawk, the American. He was a great example and a role model for all of us to follow. So we're honored to present this little token to our students today. Larry, thank you very much for your help with our Native American Summit.
Elder Echohawk is slated to be our speaker. We're so grateful he has been able to make his schedule available to speak to us today. So we'll turn the time over to Annabelle to respond to this award and also continue with her speech.
Appreciate the invitation to be here, and especially appreciate the recognition that has been given to me today by Governor Herbert and Lieutenant Governor Bell. I need to be a lawyer just for a minute, and that is to give my disclaimer. I am not here today on assignment from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I am here to speak to you as the former Assistant Secretary for Indian Affairs for the United States Department of the Interior. And I want to, first of all, just commend Governor Herbert and the state of Utah for convening this conference together with tribal leaders who are attending to continue to march down the path of progress within the state when it comes to Indian affairs. It was back on January 13th of 2009 that I was living the perfect life down in Provo, Utah, serving as a law professor at the J. Reuben Clark Law School. And I got a telephone call from the presidential transition team. I was a little surprised when they said they had an airline ticket and they wanted me to travel to Washington, D.C. to speak with them. I say I was surprised because I wasn't seeking any other employment and actually had not had any official role in the presidential campaign. But as I arrived in Washington, D.C., I had an interview and was peppered with questions for about an hour. No positions were mentioned, and they thanked me for coming back to talk with them, and so I departed. It was shortly afterward that I received another telephone call when some very powerful words were spoken. Your country is calling you into service. And I was offered the nomination of the President to oversee Indian affairs for the United States in the Department of the Interior. I have to admit that I hesitated, and I would not say yes to that invitation. I hesitated because the federal government has a long history of not doing very well when it comes to meeting obligations that they have imposed upon themselves when it comes to Native people. But in the end, I felt like it was a chance to try to make a difference, and so after several days of receiving telephone calls asking if I would take the position, I said I would. And that meant that I started the arduous process of United States Senate confirmation. It's not enough for the President to nominate the Assistant Secretary, but it requires a Senate vote after hearing. Under the Constitution, the position is known as an officer of the United States of America. That's why the U.S. Senate has to weigh in. And just as a little side note, after they did this enormous investigation on my background, pretty much every place I ever lived, I met with the senior agent that was handling the investigation. I was at my home in Orem, Utah, and she came in and did a few last questions, and then she got up and said, well, we're going to recommend to the President and to the United States Senate that you be confirmed. So we were walking to the door, and she stopped and turned around and looked at me, and she said, I probably shouldn't tell you this, but you are the most boring person I've ever investigated. I try to take that as a compliment. You know, that I had led a good life and not done things that were inappropriate. But this could be the White House calling right now. So it was on May 22nd of 2009 that I showed up for work in the Department of Interior. In the Department of Interior, there's a hallway called the Hall of Tribal Nations, and it gets its name because on each side of the hallway, all the way down this long hallway, are the flags of the tribal nations of the United States. And I remember walking down that hallway that morning on the 22nd of May and thinking that I was an endangered species because the position has a history of having people, you know, given the position and responsibility but not being able to serve for very long. It's very difficult, controversial. In the prior 8 years before I showed up, 7 people had held the position, either as confirmed or acting. So I knew that I had, a difficult task ahead of me. I was very blessed to have some wonderful people that agreed to join me in this new administration. And one of them has already been mentioned today. He's now standing in the back along the hallway. That's Paul Sosi, Navajo. He served as my chief of staff. He was a law student of mine, and very gifted law student, and I've tried to mentor him along in life, and I thought I would give him the ultimate challenge, and that is to leave his thriving law practice here and go back to Washington, D.C., and I've got to credit him because the Assistant Secretary of Indian Affairs does a lot of travel. Someone's got to stay home and tend to the business, day-to-day business of Indian Affairs for the United States. I traveled in 3 years into 46 states. So that'll give you some idea of how vigorous the travel schedule was. But Paul was essentially running Indian Affairs for the United States on a day-to-day basis, so I credit him for that.